We're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Dallas Winston, Bloody Elbow. This is the MMA Vivisection. I'm joined by Rabbi Connor Ruebusch and Zane Roken Simon. We're going to break down the UFC 186 card. Sorry, Zane. These guys know what they're talking about. I do not, and that is why I'm very happy to be a part of this discussion. Gentlemen, speak. Introduce yourselves.
How's my Superman curl look today, Dallas?
Solid. Tight.
Mm-hmm.
Tight.
You look like Clark Kent's cousin, Jeb Kent.
Jeb.
Jeb.
So far, in the last 15 minutes, Connor's been called Jeb Kent in mush.
Mush. Yeah, I think it's mush. Kyle McLaughlin, who writes for Bad Left Hook and Bloody Elbow, just called me mush. If you're British, tell me if I'm being insulted. I don't think that I am, but somebody write in the comments, am I being insulted?
I told Connor I interpreted that as robust and sexy in UK speak, whatever dialect you're using.
For whatever it's worth, I'm definitely insulting you, Connor.
by almost calling me Clark Clint, which I think is the most offensive combination of syllables I've ever heard. Clark Clint.
Nah, you're Jeb Kent.
Jeb Clint, sorry.
UFC 186, fighting, mixed martial arts, socially acceptable combat. Gentlemen, your thoughts on the card?
It would be good for like a Fight Pass card or like, I don't know, one of the lesser Fox shows that they've been running.
I think this would work for a Fox show.
Yeah. It's not, like as a pay-per-view, it's still kind of ugly, even with Rampage back on it. But it's, at least the Rampage fight gives it a little extra name value for fans. Otherwise, the main card looks fun. Like, I'll say that. Like, I don't see any boring or bad fights on the main card. And underneath it, there's no real, like, major name value. There's some fun fights, but not a lot to get really excited about.
There aren't any that look like obvious stinkers to me, which I think is the best you can say about the undercard. And then the main card, I think the main card's pretty solid, to be honest. I don't really give a damn about Rampage Jackson versus Fabio Maldonado. I don't care about anything Rampage Jackson does anymore. But altogether, the main card has a decent mix of name value, but it's more compelling from just a matchup standpoint. It got some fun-looking fights.
Yeah.
Signifying my wisdom, I didn't even know Rampage was back on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they're having it at a 215-pound catch weight because evidently when he heard that he wasn't fighting, he immediately went to the In-N-Out Burger and stayed there for several days.
set up his training camp at the In-N-Out Burger.
He drove his truck through the front lobby, and the truck with his face on it, and
and then claimed innocence.
Yeah.
Just because my picture's on my truck. What does that mean? All right,
Dallas, you got to speak up, dude. People were saying last time you got to speak up.
Hi.
There we go.
Yeah.
Zane, did you get a haircut?
Yeah. No, it just fell out. I've been losing clumps of it lately, so
Zane and I have the same hipsterous haircut. It's just that my hair is like clunky and thick. See, we both got our shaved side, long top going on.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would call that a skater cut.
Skater boy, BOI. That's me.
Skater cut.
I think I'm gonna just shave the rest of my head at this point.
All right, so let's talk fights. Remember that one guy that got all pissed off at you guys for calling the fights wrong in the YouTube comments?
He was real mad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir. I guess we should just say at the start of all episodes, we don't bet on fights. We're basically saying that when we look at the odds, okay, this fight, the odds shouldn't be that wide, or they should be this wide, and here's why I think this is a reasonable estimation. But even people who are good professional fight pickers have long stretches of bad luck in making their picks. So please don't accuse us of making you lose money. Betting is your decision. We make our picks, but we don't even actually bet. So that's how iffy betting is. Gambling is designed to make you lose your money.
Yeah, odds for me are all about expectation. That's all it is. It's like I'm looking at what other people are expecting and comparing it to what I expect. Mm-hmm. And what I expect is not I am not a good benchmark for reality. I would love to be, but that is not something that I can comfortably say, like, oh yeah, no, my opinions in general reflect the world around me precisely. If I had that kind of power, I would be a much more sought after figure than I am.
All true. So, or in other words, you can't just go watch three jackasses on a video and figure out who's going to win a fight and how to make a shitload of money.
This is unfortunately true.
Well said. All right.
If you can, it's not us three. How about that?
I'll say this: we are more fight experts, but far more fight experts than betting experts, and our record for picking fights still rarely goes above 60%.
Yeah.
So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, it was funny when I first came on to Bloody Elbow and started to do dissections. I thought I was hot shit because for the first year I was like almost 75%, and I was like, "What? Jeez, man, I fucking know what's going on." And then for the next couple of years, it plummeted, continued to plummet. So that's why you all should be listening to the show. Now that we've insulted ourselves and devalued everything that we're about to say, let's get into it.
Totally.
Up first, 3 fights on UFC Fight Pass, 6:30 Eastern. Aisling Daly versus Randa Marcos. I actually think that this will be a really good fight, and that Daly's kind of still, she's worthy of respect. I think a lot of people weren't so impressed with her, but she's a veteran. She's crafty. Who wants it? Who wants it? Who wants it? Who wants it?
I see. I see Aisling Daly as basically being what people expect Shayna Baszler to be right now, where she's like still crafty and capable of submitting anyone. She's very dangerous, whereas Baszler really seems to have lost the step that makes her capable of that. Daly can still compete and present that risk. So she still probably has. While I don't ever see her being really a top 10 in this division, she still has that potential to be a pretty dangerous gatekeeper to the top 10. With that being said, I think that Randa Marcos is a really, really hot prospect. I think she is bound for the top 10, and I just think she's too well-rounded and most importantly, too athletic for Daly, who, much like Baszler, seems to really fall behind when it comes to just being stronger and faster than her opposition. She has the skills, but not the not the physiology to really break through that ceiling. So I got to go with Randa Marcos.
Not to be inappropriate, Connor, but that is your cat on your lap, and you don't have a miscolored prehensile boner.
This is my cat. Yeah, this is not a Wookiee penis appearing up from the bottom of my screen.
Wookiee penis, good times, good memories. Zane's, on that note, let's segue to Zane's time.
Oh, I am not. I'm not
Smooth
prepared
handoff.
for all of it. Yeah, I mean, other than a win over Jessica I back at 125 pounds in 2011, which I think was probably one of the earlier fights in I's career. Yeah, it was only I's 4th fight. Daly has really generally struggled every time she's faced an elite athlete in her division, and even some not so elite athletes, people like Rosie Sexton, and Lisa Ellis, who are both capable fighters and technical fighters, but not an athletic step above the rank and file. Randa Marcos is a big athletic step up above the rank and file in that division. She's really raw. This is a lot like the Paige Van Zandt Felice Herrig fight to me, where like Van Zandt is super raw, just about as raw as young talent can be, but she's still so much better an athlete than most of her division that even against a really experienced vet like Felice Herrig, she's still gonna win because she's gonna beat like 90% of her division just by being the better athlete. And I think Randa Marcos is sort of in that same boat. Her fight it was against Jessica Penne, right? And yeah, that's like maybe that's a step too high. Jessica Penne, somebody who's really that crafty and difficult and only loses to elite competition, but Daly's not that.
Penne is kind of what Daly would be with considerable strength advantages. Like Penne is that kind of crafty grappler, plus she's also a very capable athlete herself.
Yeah.
And really, I don't think anyone expected Marcos to do as well as she did. She was kind of the like the underdog that came through.
Yeah.
Has she ever? One quick question: has she ever fought a solid submission fighter? Because Randa's wrestling is
Well,
really
Penne.
solid.
Yeah.
And then let's see. I was thinking she has another. She lost to Justine Kish, but I'm trying to think. I mean, Penne or Marcos has only been fighting for a year and a half basically, or 2 years at this point. And yeah, there's nobody else on that list that's gonna surprise anyone. But even Penne, that was against a very good submission fighter there, that was a split decision. So I think
Yeah.
she's pretty capable at handling herself.
And I just asked that because that's the one. Sometimes submission, I guess Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or MMA submission grappling is pretty intricate. It's one of those where you can do it for 20 years and still have a lot to learn. So a lot of times with raw talent and athleticism, that's tough to make. And I think Daly's submission game is really, really crafty.
Yeah. But if you're not going to get caught by Penne, it's unlikely you'll get caught by Daly.
Yeah, and wasn't it weird, Felice Herrig going old like Vale Tudo days, like trying to chain subs together without even attempting wrist or posture control whatsoever? I mean, that was
That's kind of her game. Like that's how, and it's done really well for her on the ground. She's a much more difficult grappler than people expect because she will just go after submission after submission after submission. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird for somebody who's kickboxed as long as Herrick has that she's really, like, her best skill is her aggressive grappling.
And she was floating really nicely from one to the other, but it's like she was only attacking from the waist down, so they were beautiful transitions, but pretty tough to secure anything. All right, so anyways, I think Marcos is a safe pick there. It's minus 260. She's the favorite, about as an average. Daling is the underdog at plus 200 to about plus 220, but there's 2 sites that have her up in the plus 240s. Moving up next, Jessica Rekos versus Valerie Letourneau. Zane Simon?
Ugh. This is not a fight that I feel like I could really pick well. Rekos, I mean, she's been out for so long at this point, and now she's dropping a bunch down to 115 pounds, that it's really hard to think, to know what I'm going to see out of her. I think I have to take Letourneau just based on she seems to be a pretty decent athlete who's now, she's now training at a TriStar, and one who's actually got some decent power in her hand, some capable boxing to work with Rekos, and then the rest of the game behind it. Rekos's only, other than doing well on Tough, she's only ever won one MMA fight in her career. And, it's not even like she hasn't been knocked out in others. So I just don't see anything out of Rekos at the moment that I would trust to win a fight consistently.
Yeah, I have to agree. I can't really add anything to that. Letourneau, I mean, we saw how tough she is. She's tough as hell in her last fight. She got her eye busted up, I think, in the very first round. She's not like the craftiest striker in the world. She will just continue to go to the well with the same thing over and over. I think she did that with the uppercut when she fought. What was the girl she fought?
Elizabeth Phillips.
Yeah, and so, but she keeps going until it works, and I think that's the best thing you can say about her. She's got volume, and she will continue to attack. And Rekos, apart from being a very one-dimensional fighter, is not actually that amazing in the one dimension she's good at. You know what I mean? She's not an incredible boxer when it comes to MMA. I think the threat of the takedown tends to kind of kill her volume. And so she just kind of ends up moving around, throwing occasional punches. I don't see that working against Letourneau, and I don't think a giant size advantage is going to magically make Rekos a better wrestler. So, she may be harder to hold down. She might be able to out-muscle Letourneau, but I can't really pick for her. Like Zane said, she hasn't really been impressive in MMA except for that one run on Tough. So, what can you do? Valerie Letourneau.
And I'd say Letourneau has been pretty impressive in the short time we've seen her on the big stage.
She's pretty good.
She's earned my respect. And like you said, she's not a hugely dynamic striker, but she's got a very functional MMA striking game. And
she's gritty. I mean, she's relatively technical with the punches she throws, and while she's not very tactical in the way she throws them, she doesn't stop throwing them. She keeps coming. So
she's got a little bit of element of street fight in there too. You know, I mean, she's aggressive and confident enough that I think that makes up for a lot of things. But she is the favorite, Letourneau, that is -160 all the way up to -185. A little tighter than I thought that these lines would be. Rekos's the underdog at about +150 across the board. You guys too? Is that a little tighter on the lines than you expected?
I think people are probably banking on the fact that Rakosi looked really good in the Ultimate Fighter and that she's going to be substantially bigger than Letourneau.
I I just think it's down to the fact that these are two women that nobody has like a lot of faith in. It's hard to put a lot of faith in either one and say like, oh yeah, no, she's gonna dominate. You know, like Rakosi hasn't looked great, but women's strawweight and women's bantamweight even like those are divisions where some it's there's so little to go on. We have a division where Raquel Pennington has been doing all right, and her record's nothing to write home about at any point. And you just don't know who in a fight like this. Is Rakosi gonna come back from a year off and look like she's actually been training her MMA game up and working on her skills, or is Letourneau gonna be? She's moving down to 115 too. Is she gonna look drained? I don't know. Like I just don't.
A lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you confidently which fights to bet on. I think I can confidently tell you not to bet on this one.
Yeah.
Too many X factors.
Up next, this is actually kind of an interesting fight, although not huge name value. But Nordine Taleb, he's still out of TriStar, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Versus Chris Clements. Where does he train?
He
Some
is
small gym.
Tompkins. He's Team Tompkins.
Team Tompkins.
So whatever they've turned in, I don't know what they've turned to now. I don't know where he's moved to now because I think that team just kind of dissolved. But that was where that was sort of his home base for a long time.
Yeah, and I think they mostly stayed together and have a different name because I know Hordesky's still there. But either way, Clements is a guy who's kind of full of surprises that I've kind of enjoyed. You're never sure what he's going to pull out. But Connor, what are your thoughts on this one?
It's a fun fight. I'm actually pretty into this one. I think I had some pretty uncomplimentary words to say about Nordine Taleb the last time that we talked about him, but that was a long time ago. The last time I did a Vivisection discussing his skills. But I didn't actually even know he was a TriStar fighter. But I'm happy to say that before hearing that just now, I kind of said he kind of looks like Rory McDonald. I think he approaches his fights in the same way. He's got a really good stiff jab. He tends to maintain his distance relatively well. He's pretty solid with his wrestling, not in a kind of blast double way, much like McDonald. He's really good at making you miss and grabbing a clinch and dragging you to the ground off of that. These nice little opportunistic takedowns. He just beat Vic Grujic not long ago, and that's the guy that Chris Clements recently beat too. So this fight kind of makes sense to see, I guess, who is the more successful man to have beaten Vic Grujic, who nobody knows about. But I kind of like this matchmaking because Clements kind of out-Grujic and Taleb out-strategied Grujic. And so, it's basically like Taleb gets to fight a tougher version of the guy he just beat, and Clements gets to prove why he beat that guy. Clements is fun, man. I was actually impressed in his last fight that he didn't go for too many crazy things. A lot of times he seems to get caught up in this idea of, oh, I'm the traditional martial arts guy, so I have to throw more side kicks and spinning leg sweeps and, hook kicks and stuff like that. He just kind of beat the hell out of Vic Grujic. I mean, he just kind of wanged him with a bunch of hard right hands. I think he hit him with a nice knee when Grujic was ducking his head. Just beat the tar out of him. And I think that's a good approach for him because he hits pretty hard. He's relatively durable, and he's short-limbed, so it's good for him to kind of be in the pocket a little bit and putting his frame to good use. Will he be able to do it against Taleb? I don't really know. Clements, I think, still doesn't have a consistent enough approach. I think he is absolutely, and he proved in his last fight, the kind of guy who can pull out a surprise at any moment. And Taleb has not been the most consistent fighter, despite having that, losing a decision to Marius Zaromskis in 2012 does not say a lot about your abilities. But, I still think Taleb is a little too consistent for Clements. So I think I've got to go with Taleb by decision here.
Clarifying question before we turn it over to Zane. When describing a past fight of Chris Clements, Connor, did you use the term he wanged him?
He wanged him with a few right hands. Yep.
Just wanted to get that covered. Zane?
Yeah. I'm never like. By the time you get to me, like,
dude, I set it up for you perfect. I tee it up for you for like the home
this
run
is why I go first. Is so by the time like.
Just relax and wang it.
Anyway,
wang it out of the park, Zane.
There we go. Yeah, I gotta go with Chris Clements here. And partially that's just because I think he's awesome, and I have trouble not picking him.
He is awesome.
He's a really awesome fighter. The big thing for me is I'm really glad Claudio Silva got injured, because he was the guy that was supposed to be fighting here instead of Clements. And Claudio Henrique Silva versus Nordine Taleb is not a fight I care about at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd much rather see Clements in this. I think the big thing for me is that, like, just if Taleb had a grappling and wrestling game that he would go to consistently, I would pick him to win this. Because that's like, to beat Chris Clements, you either had to really outstrike him well, or take him down and hold him down and force him into mistakes on the ground and, punish his cardio and submit him. And I don't see Taleb doing the second one, and I just don't think he's a talented enough striker to keep fighting Clements on the feet and not get hurt.
And I totally agree with both you guys, and I like this matchmaking because Taleb is really composed and methodical. I don't want to say safe, but he's not the kind of guy that's going to do anything overly risky or like overcommit on a punch. And Clements is kind of the opposite. He's up and down, he's fiery, and he's creative. So I think this should be a good style matchup. I'm a little surprised at the betting lines. Clements is a substantial underdog, +2. He's at about +215 across the board. Taleb is a heavy favorite, -254 all the way up to -280. So I would say that is indeed a little wider of a spread than I expected. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be an age thing, but like Taleb, these guys have been fighting. Both of them have been fighting for a while. Neither of them are that young. Clements is nearer to 40, but he's also had a bunch of injury time that he's had to take off at different points. That, it may have kind of helped him out in that way, and neither have a lot of fights. So I don't know that I think. Maybe people are banking on Clements being the more cage-worn fighter, but I haven't seen any signs of that yet.
Well, even though I probably not bet on this one, but
no.
That being, I didn't know either of those things. Clements is almost 40?
Yep.
Yeah, right. It doesn't look like it.
No kidding. Doesn't he kind of look like a blown-up Tyson Griffin a little bit?
A little.
Okay. Memory. Let's move forward. Okay.
Tyson Griffin can look like a blown-up Tyson Griffin, for that matter.
Oh man.
Clements Taleb is the final fight on the 6:30 Eastern Fight Pass prelims. The first bout on Fox Sports 1 leading into the pay-per-view is Olivier Aubin-Mercier. I don't even know if I said any of those words correctly, versus David Michaud. Zane, you better go first.
All right. This is a good fight. It's a fun fight. I think Aubin-Mercier probably takes it. Michaud's one of those fighters. These are both really green talents. Michaud is tough, and he's got some skills that he can work with, but he hasn't really quite put things together yet. He doesn't really have a consistent style that he works with. He's good he's good inside, but he's not great at getting there. He's not great at controlling the clinch and all that when he gets it. Unless he's really overpowering somebody like Garrett Whiteley, then he's not necessarily dominant. Whereas Aubin-Mercier, he's still got a lot of technical gaps to fill, but he's really a great athlete in the making. And I have a lot more faith in him being able to use that athleticism to his advantage against somebody else who's also raw and is not, it doesn't have the technical skill to just really outwork him cleanly. So I think I got to pick Aubin Mercier, but it should be a scrappy back and forth fight.
Yeah, this is kind of a dark horse for a potential fight of the night here. Like, this could be a really back and forth a battle, really competitively matched. I was really impressed with Michaud's last fight against Garrett Whiteley. The thing is he seemed to put himself in all the right places, but just didn't perhaps keep his feet set enough, or pick the exact right moment to throw his strikes. So he just wasn't able to hurt Whiteley like he should have been able to with the angles and the strikes that he was throwing. But technically speaking, it was a really impressive performance. And for his part, Olivier Aubin Mercier is just a tank. I mean, you can see just by the way he's built, he looks like he's got that Kelvin Gastelum or the Bryan Melanson kind of build where he's just like a brick shithouse. I think he's more square than rectangular, and so and his power carries through in that sense. Once he gets his hands on you, he ragdolls most fighters. He's able to toss guys around. He's pretty raw at range, if I remember correctly. I don't think he's really polished that up. So Michaud has some chances there, but since Michaud is not much of a potent puncher, he's not really going to sting you with a hard shot as you're coming in. He kind of needs the chance to move around on the feet to really do accumulative damage, and I don't see Mercier or Aubin Mercier really giving him that much time to work. So I think I've got to go with Aubin Mercier, but if Mercier decides to play the striking game a little bit, this could be a really fun fight.
Doesn't Aubin Mercier have isn't he a judoka?
I think so.
Yeah. He's a pretty heavy favorite, minus 350 all the way up to minus 380. Michaud is the dog at plus 291 up to plus 325. Next bout, Bryan Barbarina versus Chad Laprise. Chad. Conor Ruebusch.
Oh, man. Barbarina, what was Barbarina's last fight?
Oh, he
fought Joe Ellenberger.
Yeah, he beat the piss out of Joe Ellenberger.
Yeah, this is a tough fight to call for me. Barbarina's pretty powerful. Barbarina's pretty powerful wrestler
Lightweight.
type of fighter.
Oh,
yeah, lightweight. Yeah. I don't blame you for thinking that I'm blanking on the weight division or any specific details of fighting for that matter. Barbarina is pretty powerful. That's kind of what I think of everything he does is just power. He's pretty dangerous in the clinch. He was really throwing Joe Ellenberger around and didn't really seem to have any difficulty with the guy who is typically a pretty physical fighter himself. Laprise, on the other hand, is... it's kind of weird. This is kind of like Michaud versus Aubin Mercier, but I kind of feel like I'm going the other way with it. I think Laprise is a more consistent technical fighter. He leaves fewer openings. He's better at making sure the fight stays in his preferred area. And while he's not a devastating puncher, I think he definitely has more of a kind of get off me authority to his punches than David Michaud does. Whereas Barbarina's got that physical strength, but he really kind of needs to get inside to get his work done. In this case, I think it's a disadvantage for the grappler. So I'm going to go with Laprise.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think the big things for me are I realize I don't know that I'm all that impressed by a win over Joe Ellenberger. I mean, although I have to say, for the same part on Aubin Mercier, I'm not all that impressed by a win over Jake Lindsay. Those aren't big, like, oh yeah, you really took it to somebody who's great, in your wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of with Barbarina, the thing I feel like is that he really, Ellenberger's thing has been like staying consistent past the first round, and Barbarina was really able to stay aggressive longer. Deep into the fight, he was able to stay on Ellenberger and stay on him, and showed great cardio and just relentless attack, and that broke Ellenberger more than I think his pure technical skills, or even necessarily his raw physicality.
Mm-hmm.
And Laprise by similar means, he's not a fighter that gets tired. He's not a great He's not a power puncher. He's not a real dominant threat anywhere. But he's consistent everywhere. He stays with his game. He's good over long haul. He game plans well. He seems to attack well. And I think he'll be ready for Barbarina and be able to stave him off and touch him up a little and make him work just hard enough with the striking, harder than Ellenberger could, to make this fight hard on him. But at the same time, if Barbarina really does show that aggression and just press Laprise early, he could potentially just put him into a grinding fight and wear him down. So I'm taking Laprise, but it's not a dominant, absolute pick.
I'm interested to see how Barbarina does in this one, because I think it was such a not that Joe Ellenberger's unstoppable, but I think it was shocking the way Barbarina took him apart. And then the question is, how healthy was Joe through all that? So I think this is a huge chance for Barbarina. Pretty tough matchup, and the betting lines reflect that. He's a big underdog, plus 270 all the way up to plus 325. Actually, he's only plus 270 on one site. Most of the sites have him at 300 or 325. Laprise is a big favorite, minus 400 to minus 350, right in that range, but most sites have him at minus 400. Agree? Agree? Disagree?
No, that's too steep for me. Laprise hasn't proven anything in his career to suggest to me that he's about to be any kind of dominant fighter. He's consistent and reasonably technical, and those two things kind of mark his career. But he's not he's not an athlete that's putting people away and just crushing dudes out there. I don't see any reason that he should be a huge dominant favorite over somebody who's also got about the same body of work.
What was the line on Barbarina?
He's at plus 325.
My God. Yeah, that's...
Well, can't you say his win over Ellenberger is really better than any win that Laprise has had yet?
Oh, Aubin Mercier is about an equivalent win, I would say.
Yeah, Ellenberger has the name value of his brother, but he's nowhere near what Jake Ellenberger at least used to be, or even necessarily what he is now. So, and Aubin Mercier is, we spoke pretty highly of him in the last fight, and for good reason. He's a pretty promising fighter, so...
Up next, this one's kind of old school. Alexis Davis versus Sarah Kaufman. This should be a good scrap. Whose turn is it? Zane? I think it's your turn. Is that right?
All right. Yeah, this is one of those fights too that, because the division is the way it is, it's a fight we've already seen happen once, a long time ago now. And Sarah Kaufman won it there, and I'm a little, I don't know. I feel like at one point I was really kind of down on Sarah Kaufman right around the time that she no contest Jessica Eye. That was really kind of an ugly fight for me. And before that, her win over Leslie Smith was really an ugly split decision that Smith might have won. And that came on the back of a loss to Ronda Rousey. So you had these three fights that Kaufman was either close to losing or lost. And I don't know that, but then she came back against Leslie Smith and just absolutely demolished her the second time around. Just beat the brakes off her. And I don't know how I feel about her, where she is. Whereas Davis, I kind of know what to expect. It's really not powerful but consistent striking, and then a prototypical trip and drag to ground grapple game. And it's not the process game that you would like to see out of a fighter, but she makes it work. She's been able to get through and put enough volume on most of her opponents to beat them, and then or to keep them from outstriking her, and then to drag them down to the ground and out grapple them pretty soundly. I do think it's something that Kaufman might be ready for. I kind of got to pick Kaufman here. I think her game is generally just a stronger MMA game. She's much more of a wrestle boxer, sprawl and brawl, take you down, punch away from top control, get back up, box and sprawl out. Whereas Davis really needs to be able to push you around on the feet to be able to get into the clinch and then drag you down and get on top of you and work you over from there. And I just think Kaufman's too consistent and too experienced to let that happen to her.
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing against Sarah Kaufman here and throughout the rest of her career is that she just doesn't hit hard enough to make her style consistently effective. And like a lot of Jackson Winklejohn fighters, her striking is kind of highlighted by the fact that she doesn't seem to have any linkage between her punches and her lower body. So she's just kind of not moving her feet or shifting weight or moving her feet completely irrespective of what her hands are doing, and her hands are just pumping away with arm punches. Despite that, she's been incredibly successful because she is absolutely relentless. She has no fear of standing in the pocket. She puts together really good combinations. Her punch selection is very intelligent. She counters well, and she's muscular and strong. Like, she's pretty difficult to out-muscle or overpower in the clinch or to easily take down. And she's a pretty crafty grappler, too. Alexis Davis has a little less connection between the different parts of her game. She's either unimpressively kickboxing or doing a really good job grappling. But, I mean, her kickboxing is really bad. I think people... Zane, I think you called it consistent. I would call it consistently bad. I really don't think it's good. She's awkward, stiff, stands way too upright, so she has no takedown defense. Her strikes are incredibly slow. She has all the problems that Kaufman has without having it built into the same kind of strong MMA-oriented clinch game to help it work. Nor the combination striking. So, I have to go with Kaufman here. I think Davis will probably make it a close fight, just like the last one. It'll probably be a close split majority, some kind of decision, like many of Kaufman's wins are. But Kaufman's consistent. She keeps doing her thing, and it keeps working, even if she never manages to pull ahead.
Oh, I should point out real quick before we wrap up that Kaufman has actually beat Davis twice now. So it is really hard to pick Alexis Davis to...
Twice?
Yep. Once really early in their careers, once in the middle of their careers, and now they're fighting again late in their careers.
I was going to ask you when you said the first time, so what was the one middle of their career, like 5-6 years ago?
That was... Oh, shoot,
It was in 2012, and it was a majority decision for Kaufman.
In what promotion?
Strikeforce.
Oh, right. So the first one must have been forever ago.
It was 2007 at some promotion called UWC.
Weird. Connor, were you...
No, that's all. I'm going with Sarah Kaufman. There's really no other choice here.
And don't you guys think this kind of, even though it's not, as all-enveloping as it sounds, but that this is a good... I was going to say plays into Kaufman. It's a good matchup for her because I think she's got a really proven and reliable strategy or whatever of dictating range on the feet. And I think maybe that's why when kind of you said she doesn't have huge power, I think it's because she moves pretty well. She stays light on her feet and she doesn't get caught, planning. Because that's what Davis will want to do. Time it when she's sitting down in a punch, clinch up with her, hit a takedown from there. I don't think it's Machida-esque, but I think she does a pretty good job of being a volume striker without committing to the point where a grappler like Davis can.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what a lot of the Jackson Winklejohn fighters, what they have in mind. But to the same point, I don't think like Michael Bisping has to be as light on his feet. I know he's not a Jackson Winklejohn fighter, but he has a similar problem of never sitting down on a strike, always being ready to move. You got to pick your spots and make some of those shots really hurt if you want to be really consistently successful. If guys are desperate to close the range on you or whatever, or desperate to get on your hips, you got to sting them every now and then. You can't just be ready to defend because then you're acknowledging that you're going to have to wrestle with them. You know what I mean?
You look at the difference between, Bisping and Max Holloway, and that's like, you have two fighters that are hard to hit and move really well, and one of them is putting people away right now at the top level of the sport, and the other one has never been able to.
Or like Stephen Thompson, who's been showing some really good wrestling improvements lately and good takedown defense. He still knows when to sit down and really hurt somebody with a punch to make them know that they can't just walk through his range.
Yeah.
Or the master Chuck Liddell. I mean, that's why Chuck is.
Well, Chuck Liddell was all stinging punches.
Yeah, there were times though, like Randleman, where he just had sick power because he was, that was a check hook. I think he knocked out.
Yeah.
But So either way, I think it's hard to disagree with you guys. Kaufman is the favorite, minus she's at about minus 200 all the way across the board. Davis, the underdog, at about +1 between plus 160 and plus 170. Up next, the barn burner, the one we've all been waiting for: Joe Riggs versus Patrick Cote.
This fight sucks.
Isn't this
This
just
fight,
a matter of like stealing Riggs from Bellator, nothing more?
kind of. Mostly it's just depressing. It's
Well,
not a fight.
sorry, but I was gonna say, like, to me, like, Cote's done okay. I mean, he's hung
Yeah,
around, he's done okay. But compared to Riggs, like, Riggs is, he what happened on Fight Master? He
he
lost on Fight
won.
Master?
No, he
He
won the
won.
whole
Did he
thing.
win it all?
Yeah. He is the
Yeah.
fight master.
All right, that's
And he just really proved like that against a really bottom of the barrel level of competition, veteran Weil will get you through, and that's kind of something we've known for a while. That if you are crafty and have a lot of experience, you can beat those kind of guys. But
Or even just
like
in a short tournament structure, that kind of thing
yeah,
helps a lot.
yeah, exactly. And Cote and Riggs are kind of at similar points in their careers. Like both guys are on the downside, but Cote's one big advantage is the one that he's always had, which is that his chin is just indestructible. He's been hurt before by Alessio Sakara, but I'm pretty sure that was largely due to strikes to the back of the head that he was knocked out. And generally, he recovers really well and takes shots in the first place really well. Even guys who beat him up rarely beat him up or rarely put him away. So, and Riggs has kind of shown more and more a tendency to get hurt when he shouldn't be getting hurt. And it's kind of worrying, actually, with Joe Riggs. That's why I say this fight sucks. It's just a sad fight to even think about because Riggs, at this point, probably, I don't think, has any choice or doesn't feel like he has any choice but to go on fighting. But if you listen to the guy talk, he's clearly slurring his speech. He's just got... He's a little punch drunk at this point in his career. So, at least I can say that Patrick Cote is not consistent enough these days. Doesn't put enough volume out there to probably really hurt Riggs. But if he does, Riggs is likely to go away in a single shot and not absorb a lot of damage. So, I mean, anyway, I guess I got to go with Cote. I don't really want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I like that as a summary. Anyways, whatever. Cote.
Yeah. You got to go with Cote here. Just if nothing else, too, Cote has figured out that when he doesn't want to stand with people, he'll just out wrestle them and grind them down and make sure he gets a points win. More so than when he was younger and was just all like, I'm just gonna box from range. And yeah, I mean, Riggs hurt himself taking Ben Saunders down. There's just no way to pick him at this point. There's no way. He hurt his neck taking Ben Saunders down. I can't. You got to go with Cote. Even if Cote hasn't looked impressive in a long time, I got to go with Cote.
You still kind of know what to expect with Cote.
Yeah.
And that's
He still put enough fear in Stephen Thompson to actually force a decision in a fight where he was clearly outclassed.
Yeah.
Well, Cote's a brick. He is not easy to... he is the kind of guy you have to go out and defeat him. And if I was playing matchmaker, I'd put Riggs up against a younger guy because he is crafty, he's really well-rounded, he's got a lot of experience. But when you face a guy like Cote, that kind of evens out. So I think it's a pretty tough matchup for him. And I think we're past the point, like the Vitor Belfort-esque, where we'll say, but you never know what Joe Riggs is gonna. I mean, he could. He still has a little bit the potential to show shades of brilliance here and there, but I don't think anyone's holding their breath at this point.
No.
I'm glad that he's in the UFC though. I mean, he's been in the trenches for a long time. So
I hope he's making money out of it. That's my thing.
Yeah, I respect Joe Riggs. I respect his efforts too. How many fights does he have now?
Like 50 something, right?
He's got he's 40, 15 and 1, so 56.
And some big names on that record too. So
Oh,
yeah. He's fought a relative who's who, and
Yeah.
Now we get to see his awful tattoo in the biggest fight organization on earth.
Okay, so Cote is the favorite, minus 180 to minus 210, and Riggs is the dog, anywhere from plus 180 to plus 155. All right, let's move forward. This is the main card. Are we on the main card? We are on the main card. Oh, this is the pay-per-view. That's right.
Yeah.
This pay-per-view, by the way. Do you guys know?
How much?
Yeah.
$70, I think.
Is that
Or
for
like
HD
60
or for normal?
65 maybe or 60 for normal, or how
Yeah,
I don't know how much the price difference is between the two.
Okay, so no change. All right, I was just making sure.
I think it's a $10 bump for HD.
Yeah, so it's 60 and 70. Like they've gone up $5 or $10 or whatever they went up earlier this year.
Okay, so they have, because I used to say it used to be either like 45, 50-ish, and then 55.
It was 45, 55, I think, and now it's 60, 70 or something like that.
A little bit steep, but regardless, first fight up on the pay-per-view, 10 o'clock Eastern, Thomas Almeida versus Yves Jaboin. Somebody talk about it.
This fight is not awesome. Thomas Almeida is awesome, and they're putting him on the main card here, clearly against a kind of faded Yves Jaboin in hopes that he will kind of make a name for himself. Unfortunately, he doesn't have name value of his own yet, so he's not going to get seen by as many people as he could, but he's definitely a fighter with, if not championship potential, then high-level action fighter potential. The last fight, his UFC debut, was the first decision of his entire career against Tim Gorman, and it was still an incredibly dominant performance. And he's finished every other fight he's ever had, most of those on the feet. He's a really, really capable kickboxer. As Zane was saying, I think before the show, he's the new generation of shoot box fighters. So it's got that really, well, in some parts he has a Brazilian style of Muay Thai. But Pat Wyman and I were talking about him the other day. He kind of reminds both of us of Nicky Holtzkin, too, the Glory fighter. He's a very capable boxer, more so than most Brazilian Muay Thai fighters. Throws really good.
Take care, Connor. Thanks.
Anyway, throws really good combinations. Is just, there's Connor's back. I finished the combinations part because I knew where you were going with that.
Yeah, really good punch combinations, especially to the body. What else? Yves Jaboin, unfortunately, is too faded to hang with a guy like Thomas Almeida, who is just very well-rounded and very, very dangerous on the feet. So I see, Jaboin is crafty. He will always be crafty as long as he continues to fight. But much like the other Yves Edwards, he just doesn't have it anymore to be at the top level. So I think I will say Thomas Almeida by a late knockout.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Jaboin is that, he's always been kind of a live by the sword, die by the sword fighter. He's either winning a big, knockout via a big knockout or losing via knockout. Mm-hmm. And lately, his UFC and WEC career has mostly been a lack of knockouts on his part and more getting knocked out on his part. The big thing I think later that we've seen recently, like with his win over Mike Easton, which was a nice, great bounce back win, fun fight, is that it showed, that Jaboin can still fight well in spurts. Like every other, it's like every third minute of that fight, he was dominating Easton. Every third minute, he was getting dominated, and the one in between was an even fight. So it was a really weird, he could maybe touch Almeida up a little, hurt him here and there, but I don't see him having the consistency to actually go out and win. And he doesn't have the kind of chin, the kind of unbreakable chin, to then take shots in return. So I think that at some point Almeida's going to hurt him badly, and that'll probably end this fight. And hopefully it's just a good showcase win for an up-and-coming talent.
And I think that the Easton fight's a really good example of where Jaboin is at, because much like Easton, I think he's kind of got a little bit of sparring partner syndrome, where he's kind of giving guys just a tough enough of a fight to be competitive, but if they really take it to the next level, he's not doing what it takes to win. You know what I mean? He's just kind of hanging around. He was hanging around with Eddie Wineland. Like, he definitely fights up to the level of his competition, but he fights up to, like, just a fraction of a cent below the level of his competition. It's just enough to usually let them eke ahead if they really want it. and Tomas Almeida really wants it, and I bet he's probably not happy about the fact that he got the first decision of his career in his UFC debut, so I have a feeling he will be gunning for a knockout.
When you say Jabuan is really technical, but he at the same
Mhm.
time he really doesn't give you a lot to fear on the feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to have a lot of power, and in his early fights, he was knocking everybody out. But that can be kind of a lot to do with the level of competition you're facing too. There's very few guys. There's nobody he beat early in his career that went on to bigger, better things.
Yeah,
And
I mean, like he was knocking Jeff Hoogland around when he fought him in the UFC, but Jeff Hoogland is not a UFC level opponent, and he was on the verge of knocking him out, but that's the last time I can really say that about an Yves Jaboué opponent.
yeah, I mean, he took Dustin Peg took him to a split decision. So
There you have it, folks. Thomas Almeida, big favorite. As of now, the biggest favorite on the card, minus 420 to minus 450. Yves Jabouan is the underdog at about plus 325 to plus 330, although you can get him a little bit lower and higher, plus 315 and plus 360 on a couple other sites. John Makdessi versus Shane Campbell. Isn't Campbell filling in for Abel Trujillo?
yep,
And that actually would have been a really good fight.
This is a good fight too.
this is a good fight too. It is.
I don't know a lot about Shane Campbell. Please.
Well, for those who don't know Campbell, he was the guy who basically got a body kick TKO and then Hadoukened his opponent in the recent World Series of Fighting event. He hit him with the chi ball after knocking him into the cage, holding his liver together after he broke it apart with a kick. So he's had some solid wins in. I don't know if they were Muay Thai or if they were more K1, like international kickboxing rules, but he's a good kickboxer. He's a good striker. The interesting thing about this matchup is that Makdessi, of course, is a TriStar fighter, and if Makdessi does what TriStar fighters tend to do, he may be looking for takedowns here. He may be trying to take Campbell out of his element. But in the past, Makdessi has really proven to be kind of content to strike with people. He completely indulged Darren Cruikshank in the striking exchanges. Granted, Cruikshank's not a bad wrestler, but he didn't really try to take Cruikshank down. To his credit, he did outstrike Cruikshank. He's got a very good jab, a nice, tricky left hook that he likes to throw off of it. He sits down occasionally on a good 1-2. He moves his feet. He uses a side kick. But it's not a damaging boxing game. It's like an outboxer's game that a small guy is using, and Campbell's just a much more dynamic and dangerous striker on the feet. I think Makdessi may still have the better MMA game when he chooses to use it. But overall, style versus style, I like Campbell to win this fight.
Yeah, I gotta admit, it is a really bad matchup for Makdessi. Much more so than Abel Trujillo was, quite honestly. Because Trujillo at least is not consistent. I mean, Trujillo's either on or he's not. Once he's off.
Makdessi could have played Matador with Trujillo.
Exactly. Campbell, I think the biggest thing I fear I have is that Makdessi, not only will he be way shorter here, he's, it's 5'11", well, 5'11", 4'8", so, or 5'8". I always forget that
That is a big height disparity, 4'8".
No, 4'8", 5'8". I always forget that Makdessi's not as short as he looks because his head is gigantic. Like, he's got a really huge head that adds, 2 inches of height to him, given his frame, because he looks like he's, 5'3", You ever see him in photos, and he looks tiny.
So your measurements were correct. His head is 4'8". His entire body is 5.
Yeah. But Makdessi, at his best, he's getting inside and, boxing you up inside. But he's not great at closing the distance. I mean, that's something that Alan Patrick really showed, was that you use, a jab, and even not a great jab, and some outside and some body kicks, and you can screw Makdessi's whole game up all fight.
Makdessi's got a great counter jab. He's really good at spearing you as you come in, but if you're fighting him at range, he tends to struggle.
Yeah,
well,
and so
because sorry to interrupt you, Zane, but when Makdessi first came in, he was a killer with range kicks, hook kicks, and
yeah, he still is. But honestly, I think just kind of at this level of competition, people aren't really caught off guard by those things as much. He's still got a good turning side kick and a good side kick and a hook kick, but
Well, and when you have short limbs, having a range kicking game is not that's not to your advantage, you know? I mean, that's the classic Chris Carriasso conundrum. How do you be a range fighter who is shorter than all of your opponents?
Yeah, you got to be really good at it.
So, and then when he moves inside, like the clinch and the tie clinch, he's moving right into where Campbell wants, which is the tie clinch and all that. Like, it's just an ugly matchup for him, much more so than a lot of Makdessi's other fights have been, you know, much more so than Sam Stout or Darren Cruikshank or Hene Forsch, who all want to spend time at range and will give Makdessi the time to set up his own movement and all that. This reminds me a lot more of the Njokuani fight, and that was a fight that Makdessi lost.
I was actually gonna say before, Campbell's very much like Njokuani as he used to be, not the lack of volume, far too patient for his own good Njokuani. And actually, I completely forgot about that fight, but it's very much like the Alan Patrick fight too. And the fact is that Campbell's a better kickboxer than Patrick. He's got more skill in that range. And you know, I was upset about that fight when it first happened. When I rewatched it, I was like, yeah, I guess he kind of gave that fight away.
And I think the only question mark in my mind is that Campbell is not the same athlete that Patrick and Njokuani were, or are. And so if Makdessi can really like use his speed and power to try and keep Campbell working harder than he should, then he could take this fight. But I don't know that Makdessi necessarily has enough process to do that. Like, I don't know that he really thinks that deep into his tactical fighting.
So I don't know enough about Campbell to form a logical opinion, but Makdessi is the favorite here, minus 170 to minus 180. Campbell is the underdog at about plus 150.
It's a name favorite, I would say. Nobody knows who Campbell is.
All right, we're moving on to our three big featured fights. Rampage versus Fabio Maldonado. Zane Simon.
Bisping Dollaway first, I believe? Or is Rampage Maldonado now co-main, or now third on...
It's co-main on the UFC's page.
Is it?
So, but I have seen it the other way at other places, so there's been some confusion about it.
Okay, well, whatever. Rampage Maldonado. Man, Rampage should win this. Anybody who has been an elite UFC light heavyweight, or an elite level MMA light heavyweight, I shouldn't say UFC, but an elite level light heavyweight, and who's trained tactically and trained around their fight, to the fight in front of them, and has worked on all their skills and all that, should beat Fabio Maldonado, because the game plan is so damn simple. Like, it's just literally don't play the jab game at range. Don't let him out jab you, and don't let him put your back to the fence. If you can do that, you can beat Fabio Maldonado. And Rampage should be able to win it. Do I trust that he'll win it? I don't know. Mostly I do. I gotta pick Rampage here. He's never lost to a fighter like Fabio Maldonado, or even come close to losing to a fighter like Fabio Maldonado. I mean, Joey Beltran would be like the closest comparison, and Rampage killed Beltran. So I gotta go with Rampage.
I think I was one of the few people who was pretty impressed with Rampage's performance against King Mo in Bellator.
Mm-hmm.
It was a close fight, but people also have come to the conclusion that King Mo is just a trash fighter because of his some of his tough losses, and the fact that he can't beat Emmanuel Newton, which is also due to the fact that people really underrate Emmanuel Newton, who is a surprisingly difficult fighter to beat.
Yeah.
King Mo's a good fighter, and Rampage Jackson hung with him. And I did have Rampage winning that fight, and I thought that Rampage looked like he'd made some nice adjustments to his game. He was fighting in very much of a classical boxer/wrestler stance. He had a nice low base. His head was off center. He used his jab. He cut off the ring pretty well. he did a lot of things that I don't normally associate with him. A lot less of just kind of walking at you with no jab and just trying to cover up and counter with a big hook. It was more of a boxer's game. So I thought that was good. And yeah, if he does that kind of thing against Fabio Maldonado, he should win. But I got to be honest, I don't like Rampage Jackson. I think he's one of the most profoundly unlikable fighters in all of MMA. Every time I hear him speak or see him interact with somebody, it rubs me the wrong way. And so, for hilarity's sake, I'm going to pick Fabio Maldonado, because if Fabio Maldonado beats Rampage Jackson, it will be amusing. And that's what I want to happen.
Well, heads up, I'm a Rampage fan. I like him. And there was, again, like speculation, but the story when he signed with Bellator was that for his last 3 fights in the UFC, his knee was really bad. And the only reason I bring it up is because that made sense. In his last 3 fights, we were all he was like wobbling around. And it was like, why aren't you, like planting your feet and throwing, any heaters? That's Rampage's whole game. And then supposedly he got his knee fixed, and then when he went over to Bellator, it did look like we saw, like Connor was saying, shades of the old Rampage. Wouldn't you say that this really is again, I don't know if tailor-made, that might be a little dramatic, but I mean, unless Maldonado's gonna, dance around on the fringe and try to jab him, he is not afraid to get into the phone booth, and Rampage spends the vast majority of his time trying to trudge into the phone booth and uncork big punches.
Well, I think this is one of the few instances where, despite the ridiculous reason for why I picked Maldonado, I think he probably will be competitive. And I think that this is one of the few instances where MMA math really kind of works. Rampage versus Glover Teixeira, Rampage struggled. Glover Teixeira versus Fabio Maldonado, Glover Teixeira dominated, but still got hurt a couple times, and Maldonado was surprisingly competitive at portions of that fight. Maldonado is shockingly durable to an insane degree. Like, the man can be basically out on his feet and still put together punches. He's also got more power than people seem to realize. He throws these weird little arm punches, but they're stinging shots. And he puts a good snap on the end of his punches. Offensively, he's a pretty solid boxer. So he's not somebody that you can just walk through. And I think that's the real difference between this and Rampage's fight with Ray Beltran. I think that Maldonado just is way more durable than Beltran and way more consistent with his volume. Beltran has been made to have fear and timidity in some of his fights and to turn his volume down and to try and box or try to wrestle. Maldonado only has the boxing, and he knows it. And he thinks of it as an advantage. Like, he doesn't think, I only have the boxing. He thinks, I have the boxing. What are you going to do about it? He wants to box you up. So I think it'll be a tough fight. I think Maldonado has a path to victory. The thing is Rampage is the smart pick, because Maldonado winning kind of relies on Rampage not fighting a smart fight. It's Rampage's fight to lose. But if Rampage makes a few wrong decisions, Maldonado is the kind of guy who will make him pay.
Zane, Simon, question for you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, ask.
I was just going to say, it would seem, and I agree, Maldonado is extremely durable, and I would guess Rampage is going to want to come back and make a big statement. Do you think it's a risk that he's going to come out and blow his wad in the first, and Maldonado's going to be able to chip away or turn the tide later?
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't think that that's something Rampage tends to do, unless he's hurt, unless he's fighting with the knowledge that he can't go 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. That's never been something Rampage really is, like, prone to. Usually he comes out and he'll try to stalk you, be patient, wait for his shots, look for openings, and just do that all fight. Like, that tends to be how he fights. And then, if you egg him on a little, he'll come after you and, try to maybe steal the end of the round and put you away with a punishing flurry right before the bell. But in general, he tends to just kind of, try to track you down and wait for you to come to him and make a bad mistake. He's not really I'm going to go out there and throw 5 big bombs and try to put this fight away in the first minute kind of fighter.
Yeah, and I also get the sense that, like, I don't think Rampage at this point in his career would have the feeling, I want to make a statement, because this may be a little too much of inference, but I don't think Rampage really likes fighting anymore. The way that
it's not inference. I was going to say, like, he said for the past decade now, off and on, I don't like fighting. Like,
Yeah.
he's said that in interviews.
And I think Fabio Maldonado really likes fighting. Like, I think Maldonado lives on, like, the blood and the guts. He is absolutely a live by the sword, die by the sword type of fighter. And so that mentality makes this fight more interesting than it really has any right to be.
The other thing that makes it interesting is that while Rampage has been fighting since 1999 and has no business being a top fighter in any way, shape, or form, Maldonado's been fighting since 2000. So who the fuck knows? Like, these guys are both guys who are way, way past their sell-by date.
Rampage is the favorite, about minus 300 as an average. Maldonado is the dog, anywhere from plus 215 up to 250. And again, little confusion. We're not 100% sure on which is going to be the co-main, but regardless, next up will be CB Dollaway versus Michael Bisping. Connor, your turn.
If CB Dollaway was still working with Joe Benavidez Jr. as his boxing coach, I would pick him in this fight. CB's still at Power MMA, right? Or which gym is it? Isn't he at the same gym as Ryan Bader?
All those Arizona, Power MMA and Fitness, all those Arizona combat guys, or Arizona ASU guys.
So for a while there, they had Joe Benavidez as their boxing coach, and that was kind of the guy behind the CB Dollaway who outboxed Tim Boetsch in very impressive fashion. Also, I poked him into submission, but outboxed him really well, and who countered Cesar Ferreira just with a devastating counterpunch and knocked him out with ease. That was a guy who was blocking shots with his shoulder and throwing combinations and placing his punches and selecting his punches really well. And he did similar. Joe Benavidez did similar things with Ryan Bader, whose boxing was looking really sharp for a while when he was fighting Glover Teixeira. Now they've got a Muay Thai coach who appears to be their head striking coach, and Ryan Bader did not look like the same striking version of Ryan Bader in his fight with Alvin St. Preux or in his fight with Phil Davis. Just was not the same kind of consistent, working off the jab, throwing the right hand, closing distance, not that kind of fighter. And so I also have little faith that CB Dollaway will be able to turn in the same kinds of performances that were really highlighting his winning streak for a while before running into Machida. I never have any questions about Michael Bisping's consistency. You know, like, that's why I have to pick him in this fight, because I always know what to expect from Michael Bisping. And I don't know what to expect from CB Dollaway, who has looked really good at times and really bad at others. Michael Bisping, even when he looks bad, you know exactly when he's going to look bad. Like, I never had any doubt in my mind he was going to lose to Luke Rockhold. I never had any doubt in my mind he was going to beat Kung Lee. You always kind of know. And unless CB Dollaway has just progressed to a new level of striking ability, I don't see him having anything that Michael Bisping can't deal with. So I have to go with Bisping by decision.
Yeah, you know, this is tough for me because I have both wanted to see CB Dollaway turn a corner and am waiting for Michael Bisping to fall off of a cliff. Like, I'm waiting for these things both to happen. And I think the Machida fight, where I actually expected to see CB Dollaway at least compete a little, like show up and, you know, work a bit and trouble Machida a little, that kind of sealed it to me that Dollaway may never turn that corner. Like, that may be the thing that's never coming. Because he just went down on the first thing that hit him, basically.
Yeah. Whereas Bisping still looked very much like the same Michael Bisping against Rockhold.
Yeah. And, you know, he wasn't going to beat Luke Rockhold, but neither was Lyoto Machida. I mean, they put up the same amount of trouble to Luke Rockhold. I mean, you know, you can't take a lot from that. But Bisping did look good against Kung Lee, and he at least competed in parts against, what's his name?
Tim Kennedy.
Tim Kennedy. Like, he at least, I think he took a round off Tim Kennedy, or came close to it. And I don't know, like, I think there was a part of me that was like, oh yeah, CB Dollaway's putting something together. He's gotten better slowly over time, and he has. But yeah, this thing with the striking coach, that bugs me, because Bader looked like a mess his last time out.
Yeah.
And even in a fight he won, he looked like a mess. And this is just that's a big question, because if Dollaway has that same really ugly striking style, then Bisping's just gonna move around him and make this whole fight tough. And I don't know. I'll take Bisping to win it, but it really is dependent on Bisping, I think, still showing up. I don't think Dollaway's ever going to turn the corner and win more than one fight in a row at the top of, in the top 10, really. It doesn't seem like that's ever going to happen. But at some point, Bisping's not going to be a top 10 or 15 fighter. May not be today, but that's
you kind of have to wonder how ironclad is Bisping's self-belief, because I mean, for years and years and years, Bisping has basically been telling himself, like, I'm one fight away from a shot at the title.
Yeah.
And I think with that loss to Rockhold, it was like he's not gonna get it. The middleweight division is now officially passed him by as far as the top 5 is concerned. So will Bisping accept his role as gatekeeper, which he's kind of been for a while, but he's always been that gatekeeper who kind of seemed like he could break through, and definitely was telling himself, like, I can break through. You know, has he accepted his role as no longer a title contender? And if he has, does that mean a different Michael Bisping shows up?
Well, thus far, I'd say Bisping's self-belief there's been quite an abundance of that thus far.
Quite obnoxious self-belief.
I think he's legit, but I mean, there's a clear ceiling there. Everyone gives him, and I've actually defended, I think that's why you brought that up about Bisping not having a lot of power, because he's so light on his feet. But there's still a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think he needs to do something differently, or if he doesn't, there's no reason that he's not going to be doomed to be maybe bottom end of the top 10 / gatekeeper. So, but I do think if he sticks with his tried and proven style, he's a good matchup. And if, I guess, tried and proven with Dollaway, then he'll lose. But the thing is Dollaway has shown some really super, almost freakishly impressive. I think we were talking about this. He finished with a Peruvian necktie. I mean, for a while there, I thought, holy shit, this kid is really going to put things together. Mm-hmm. So I guess there's a little bit of that questioning factor always surrounding him, but pretty tight on the betting lines. Bisping is the favorite, minus 145 to minus 150. Dollaway is anywhere from 120, plus 120 to plus 130. So, and I don't necessarily disagree with those odds either. Let's move on to the main hurrah. The flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Who wants to take this one?
I'll lead.
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, this is. I really, Horiguchi's a great fighter, and he has there are elements of his game that are going to be a challenge for anyone, and I think he will probably. I could see him, if not taking the first round off Demetrious Johnson, making the first round and a half to 2 rounds very difficult, just because of his timing, his distance control, the way he moves in and out of range. To some extent, he plays Demetrious Johnson's game. It's the same thing, something that I don't think anybody else Johnson has had to fight in a while. Since maybe Dominic Cruz or John Dodson, I would say, is the only other guy who was really going to be able to do that with Johnson, and that was a fight that, to some extent, Demetrius Mighty Mouse struggled in a little against Dodson. I do think, though, that as DJ's continued to evolve and become a much better clinch fighter, a much more powerful ground fighter, especially from top control, really added in some of these extra wrinkles to his game, that eventually, as he begins to time and track Horiguchi, he's going to beat him. And it might be a submission. Horiguchi tends to give up bad positions, especially in tight, in the clinch, things like that. He will give up his back. He will, let fighters take positions on him that he really can't afford to give up at some point. And I can see DJ being the one to take advantage of it. But I think it could be a close fight until that happens. I'm taking Johnson, but it should be interesting. I don't think it kills Horiguchi as a prospect or as, a future, he'll get another shot, I think, and he'll make it look like he deserves another shot.
Yeah, I hope that that's true, because really I think the only problem with this matchup is that unfortunately Horiguchi's getting this fight too soon to really have a solid chance of winning. I definitely think that Horiguchi will be a consistent member of the top 5, if not the champion in the future. I think he's got that level of talent. He's like Demetrious Johnson at range. He moves very well. He's got very tricky rhythm, and that's really, I think, what I consider the foundation of his entire game. All of his success is built on this ability to manipulate the rhythm and how the opponent is able to time him coming in, which is why even with this karate style where he's leaping in over these long distances, he's very difficult to catch cleanly while he's doing that, because not only does he have a variety of weapons that he throws, but he will get you falling into this certain pace, this certain tempo, and then just completely break and come on the half beat, or these little subdivisions of rhythm that no normal fighter is able to subconsciously keep up with. So it allows him to just throw unorthodox and weird strikes without setup, without blinding you or distracting you, just because you think you're going to be able to time him, and then you can't. So he can lead with like a spinning kick or a rear leg round kick, and you will take it clean because you have no idea when the strike is coming, and then added to that, you don't know which strike is coming. He's also a really capable wrestler. He's better than you might expect looking at his karate-based style, but he looks like Kid Yamamoto used to look in terms of his wrestling. He's also not Kid Yamamoto. Who's his trainer?
Kid Yamamoto.
It is Kid Yamamoto. Okay, I was thinking
Crazy B Jim.
That's right. And then other times he's also he'll just like switch up his style out of nowhere. Like he'll be doing this karate thing and these kicks, and then suddenly it's like a 4-punch combination with just like devastating power out of nowhere. You're like, holy shit, he just became a boxer, and now he's turned into a clinch wrestler, and he's a very capable, well-rounded fighter, and he's really dangerous in the feet. I think he is one of the few guys in the flyweight division who will keep knocking out high-level fighters for on a consistent basis. He's just, it's hard to not get hit and hurt by him. Demetrious Johnson's too good for that, though. I really think he is. And I think Demetrious Johnson is noticeably better than he was when he fought John Dodson. I really think he's... I think maybe one of the biggest things is that he's grown into being a champion. I think he knows what he can do with 5-round fights now, and he really builds his victories over the course of the rounds. He now knows he's got those championship rounds to work with, so he's setting you up for things, and because he's such a good transitional fighter, he's so good at catching you in the moment when you think you're escaping the real threat, either with a submission or a punch, these little spaces where you're kind of having these mental lapses. He can build up to those mental lapses over the course of a 5-round fight, and that's why we've seen so many finishes out of him lately, is he's now able to pick up on patterns and key in on the patterns that he wants to attack. And so, I think if you listen to interviews with him, Pat Wyman did a really good interview with him on Sherdog. He's just an incredibly cerebral fighter, very smart. I think he's got a really underrated coaching team over at AMC Pancration with Matt Hume, a guy who is like the ultimate in terms of MMA veterans when it comes to training. So, yeah, I don't think Horiguchi's ready for Demetrious Johnson. And this fight kind of... I said this on Heavy Hands the other day, but seeing this fight, I kind of resolved to stop complaining about fighters not earning title shots. Because what I really want to see is Demetrious Johnson in good competitive fights. So, like, if Horiguchi loses and then just gets a tune-up and fights Demetrious Johnson again, I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with Benavidez getting another shot, even though he's been beaten twice. I just... I kind of want to see my favorite champions fighting more often, and I don't want to wait around while guys are building up and earning their shots. So Horiguchi may not have earned it, but I think he will probably take a round or two from Johnson early. I think he'll make it competitive, and he'll stake his claim as a future contender. So I don't know. What do you say, Zane? You think Demetrious Johnson will be able to finish him?
Yeah, I think by submission late in the 3rd or 4th. I think,
like
I said, Horiguchi, when he gets in tight, the big thing with him is that he's really good at commanding distance, and not just like, oh, I'm moving in and out, darting in and out, good footwork and all that, but to the point that he'll get in, hit you, take an angle, and then shove you to create space. Like, he will keep you his space with you at all costs. He's very good at that. But at some points, especially when he gets up against the cage and things like that, his desire to create space and to kind of scramble out of things and stuff like that on the feet mean he gives up really bad positions. Like I say, he'll just give up his back, give up a position for the rear naked choke and stuff like that. And it hasn't cost him because, frankly, Luis Gatineau, Daryl Montague, Dustin Pegg, these guys weren't good enough to take advantage of it. They're not powerful enough. They're not great enough grapplers. But Johnson is. Like, if he gives those situations up to Johnson, I mean, I think Pegg took a round off him. Like Pegg got him down and had his back. If he gives that to Johnson, he won't win. He won't come out of it,
So DJ's huge favorite, minus 1,000 on 2 sites. The lowest you can get him is, well, one site has him at minus 800. Basically a range from minus 900 to minus 1,000. Horiguchi is the underdog, anywhere from plus 550 all the way up to plus 702 on a few sites. So, do you guys want to reflect back on any betting suggestions?
Yes, and do not take these so seriously that you bet hundreds and hundreds of dollars on them. Notice, I want to point out one thing. When I make betting picks and I'm talking about bets, what do I usually say? I'm usually like, oh yeah, I'd put $5 on that.
Yeah.
Like if you have spare change, like that to me is what betting is supposed to be. Very rare are the people who can be successful professional bettors or make serious money doing it. And that's why the lines...
And if they are serious professional bettors, they're not yelling at us on YouTube about it. So
no, because they're not taking their advice from us.
Disclaimer on that one. I'd say.
I will tell you now the bets that I think are worth making, that I would make with the kind of small change I would be willing to spend in a fight, just to enhance my enjoyment of it. I think that if you're going to go with an underdog bet, there are 2 obvious choices here. It's either Chris Clements at plus 215, and that may be, as Zane picked him and had a really good reasoning behind that. So I think that may be the stronger one. Barbarina, however, is more tempting line at plus 325, and he could certainly beat Chad Laprise. So I'm going to go ahead and say Clemens at plus 215. Small wager on that. You will more than double your money, so that's not a bad choice. I think Sarah Kaufman at minus 200 is not actually a bad line. I just don't see how Alexis Davis beats her. I like Shane Campbell as the underdog. I think that's great. Shane Campbell at plus 150. Yeah, hell yeah. Decent-sized bet there. Decent-sized meaning $5 or $10. And then Michael Bisping at minus 145. I think that's a good bet, too.
Yeah, I think you've covered pretty much everything. I was hoping there'd be like a prop bet on Quentin on Rampage by decision, but there's not. Because I think that would be a good bet.
Yeah.
If you could get plus odds on Rampage by decision. Otherwise, yeah, I don't see anything terribly. Is there a? Let's see.
Just as a mention, Aisling Daly versus Randa Marcos. She's 2-1 at a minimum.
I don't like it. I think that would be letting the odds make the pick for you. And I think that looking at the matchup specifically, I like Daly as the fighter. I hope she has much success in years to come, but I kind of feel like I have a handle on how she gets her successes, and it's not usually against fighters like Randa Marcos.
Yeah, a lot of these fights are just, even if the odds, no matter what the odds are, the fights are just too uneven to call. Like, that's how I feel about Marcos Daly. Is it like, maybe the odds on her are a little high, but I really can't, I don't see that fight so clearly that I'd be like, oh yeah, no, Daly's got a clear path, or, I just don't have the faith in it. It's the same thing. I think.
I just think it's closer than Cause
oh, definitely, it definitely is closer than that. I think Daly deserves better odds, but the fact is, odds are picked by the books based on like what they think you'll bet, what's going to best manipulate your decision of where to spend your money, and not based on how close the fight really is. So it needs to be like, substantially more than the closeness of the fight to make it a really strong bet, which is why I think Clemens at plus 215 is solid, because he's got better than a, whatever that means, like a 25% chance of winning. So that's a decent bet. Whereas Kaufman, I think, has better than a 50% chance of winning. So,
Yeah.
But even those ones, like even Kaufman Davis, even Bisping Dollaway, like it kind of says good things about this card, the matchmaking here, because they're really interesting matchups. Even the ones that seem to have a clear favorite, there's enough questions there to make you kind of, interested in watching.
That you can't preclude one
Yeah.
fighter entirely.
I don't feel super confident in really any of my picks. Even the ones I'm pretty confident in, I'm like, yeah, well, I could see the path to victory for the other person. This is a card full of questions, but that's why I think it's better than it seems at first glance. Especially having talked through it now, I'm like, this is I'm into this card. I think it's even like Rampage Maldonado. Just watching it with the hope that it'll be a fun competitive fight that Rampage loses will be enough for me to enjoy it, even though it's not relevant, but it should be interesting.
Yeah, Almeida and DJ are the only fighters on this card where I would be legitimately surprised if they lost. Those are the only two. Everybody else, I would be like, well, that happens sometimes,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Any final words, final plugs, self-promotion, etc.?
Nope. I'm on Twitter at Boxing Bush. Oh, also,
Yeah.
if you guys are interested in fantasy sports and you like to play countermove, I have a series of Mayweather versus Pacquiao fantasy boxing previews coming out. 2 already came out on DFSreport.com. So if like I said, I'm not a great bettor, but I consider myself to be a pretty solid fight picker, especially when I put serious effort into scouting the fighters, which I have. And Countermove is offering 8 fights for the weekend of May 2nd. So go to DFSreport.com and you'll see articles by me leading up to the week of the fight.
Yeah, you can find me at Zane Simon. Hopefully, I should have the MMA prospectus back tomorrow. That looking at all the good young talent to scout out in the MMA world. There'll be a couple fighters on this card. I think we'll be looking at Aubin Mercier and Thomas Almeida are probably the 2 fighters that we're really going to highlight off this card. Maybe Horiguchi as well, even though he's in a title fight, and at that point it's kind of hard to call him a prospect. But otherwise, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Zane Simon. Find me on Bloody Elbow, all that good stuff. So.
Oh, I also should have a Mayweather Pacquiao preview coming out on Maxim.com.
Oh, wow.
That is looking through the career wins of Floyd Mayweather, ranking them from 47 to 1. So, pretty excited about that.
Congrats.
I don't know when it's coming out, but keep an eye out for it. Thank you.
Nice. That's something to be proud of. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up. Enjoy the show. We'll see you next time.